Hello, Seeds. Today we're beginning part one of a three-part series titled Breaking the Cycle. In part one, we'll explore the why, which is the awareness. In part two, we'll focus on the how, the alignment. And then in part three, we'll discover the better way, which is the action. But before we jump into today's conversation, I want to just lay a foundation for this entire series. When we hear the phrase breaking the cycle, while many of us automatically assume that anything repeating in our lives must be bad, but what if that's not entirely true? What if we've been calling everything a cycle when some things are actually just patterns? And that distinction changes everything. And here's why. The divine creator created rhythms, cycles. The world creates patterns. And there sure is a difference. Divine rhythms are woven into creation itself. Day becomes night, winter becomes spring, seeds are planted, they grow, they produce fruit or flowers, they rest, and the process begins all over again. We breathe in, we breathe out. Our hearts beat in rhythm. Even our spiritual lives have seasons of learning, waiting, growing, pruning, and then harvest. Those rhythms aren't something the divine creator asks us to escape. They're part of how he grows us. But inside those divine designed rhythms, we often develop unhealthy patterns. Things like fear and bitterness, people pleasing, the need to control outcomes and people, comparison, shame, defensiveness. Those aren't divine designs. Those are corrupt learned responses being activated for the sole purpose of keeping us from operating in our natural flow, our divine rhythm. And that's exactly why Romans 12:2 says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now, notice the writer, Paul, the disciple. He doesn't say escape life's seasons. He says don't conform to the world's patterns. Seeds, the problem isn't that life has reoccurring seasons, it's life. The problem is that we often carry the same unhealthy responses into those reoccurring seasons. Waiting is a part of life, but panic doesn't have to be. Okay? Conflict is part of life. Defensiveness, it doesn't have to be. Loss. Loss is a part of life, but hopelessness doesn't have to be. The cycle isn't always the problem, but the pattern often is. So, throughout this series, when I say break the cycle, I'm not talking about breaking the divine creator's rhythms. No, I'm talking about breaking the unhealthy coping mechanisms and patterns we've learned to repeat within those natural rhythms, those cycles, those divine cycles. Because life will continue to bring new seasons. It will. But through the divine teacher, Yeshua, we don't have to keep bringing the same old mindset into those rhythms, into those seasons. That's what transformation looks like. Not that life never repeats, because it does. It's life. It's a cycle. The circle of life, the cycle. But that when it does repeat, you don't repeat the same old patterns that do not serve you. Now, with that foundation in place, let's get into today's conversation. Hello, seeds. Welcome back to Watering the Seed, where growth begins beneath the surface. Healing starts with truth, and every conversation is another opportunity to live a better way. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. I'm Coach D. Jackson, and I'm excited to have you join us today. You're welcome to stop by anytime. So let me ask all of you listening right now a question. Have you ever found yourself saying, I promised myself I'd never end up here again? Have you ever asked yourself that? Another job that slowly drained the life out of you? Maybe it was another unhealthy relationship, marriage, another toxic friendship, another argument that sounded exactly like the last one. Another moment where you reacted in a way you thought you'd already overcome, or repeated a familiar behavior that cost you everything. You walked away thinking, how did I get back here? After you promised it would never happen again. Well, I know I have. I know I have. I often tell my sons because they like to say what they will never do. So I tell them, never say what you will never do because when you call Never's name, Never is right around the corner and he's listening. And so is his brother Temptation. And believe me, they work together, making you do what you said you would never do or never do again. So be careful about saying what you will never do. Just say, I'll try my best to not allow that to happen or to not repeat that thing again, right? So that's what I tell my sons because here's the truth: most people don't return to what hurts them because they want pain. They return because familiar often feels safe, even when it's unhealthy. So, today on Watering the Seed, we will be exploring familiar patterns and why they're so difficult to break, how survival mode or strategies sneak in and become our identity, why we repeat emotions, not just experiences, and what scripture says about breaking unhealthy patterns or cycles. And then we'll take the first step toward, lasting transformation. Seeds, something or some things in your past may explain your patterns and repeated cycles, but it doesn't have permission to dictate or keep dictating your future. You have to write the prescription for that. You. And this is where we change that prescription. So let's talk about it. How did I get back here after I promised it would never happen again? Well, the answer isn't always a lack of willpower or self control. Yeah, sometimes, but not always. Sometimes. Sometimes it's because your heart is following a map your mind hasn't rewritten or redrawn yet. You're operating in a new condition, a healed condition, with the same outdated prescription, an old reputation that you swore you would never return to. So today we're talking about why we return to old cycles, old patterns, old behaviors, and situations that hurt us, that do harm. This is part one of a three-part series titled Breaking the Cycle. Part one is the why we return to what hurts us. Now, many of you have listened to my episodes on generational pathologies and the rippling effect. And if you haven't, I encourage you to go back and listen. I'll just leave the link in the description if you're interested. But I encourage that you do go back and listen. Because in those conversations, I explored how unhealthy beliefs, behaviors, and emotional patterns can be passed from one generation to the next. But today, we're moving beyond where those patterns began because here's the question that matters now. Why do we keep returning to those things? Why do we keep returning even after we recognize them? You see, awareness is the beginning of healing, but awareness alone doesn't change the behavior. Transformation requires something deeper. One of the greatest misconceptions we have is believing that if something feels familiar, it must be right. But familiar and healthy are not the same thing. Familiar doesn't always mean healthy. If someone grows up in a constant conflict, peace can actually feel very uncomfortable. If someone grows up having to earn love, unconditional love can feel suspicious to them. If criticism was normal, hmm, someone giving you encouragement may feel insincere. Our brains naturally seek what it recognizes, what's familiar, not necessarily what is best for us, but what's familiar. Being able to predict something creates a sense of safety for us, even when what's predictable is painful or when we realize that our prediction wasn't accurate. It wasn't even accurate. We were way off, but it felt safe, right? And that's why someone can leave one unhealthy relationship only to, enter into another one that looks completely different. Or they may finally find themselves in a healthy relationship, but spend every day waiting for it to fall apart, for it to fail. A different face, same emotional experience. Different environment, same emotional outcome. The pattern isn't chasing the people, the pattern is chasing the feeling it already knows. It's chasing what's familiar. And familiar doesn't always mean healthy. So imagine this. Imagine a man, and we'll just call him John, as in John Doe. So John grew up. John grew up in a home where love always came after performance. Good grades, his parents smiled. He cleaned his room, they praised him. He made a mistake. The affection, the warmth, all disappeared just from that one mistake. And without realizing it, John learned a quiet lesson. He learned love has to be earned. Okay, so fast forward years later, he meets a woman. He meets two women. Let's say two women. Different times, but two women. One constantly keeps him guessing. Some days she's affectionate, other days she ignores him. He's always trying to figure out how to make things better. The second woman is different. She's kind, she's consistent. She calls when she says she's going to call. She communicates honestly, she respects his boundaries. But yet, somehow, he finds himself saying, she's nice, but something's missing. What's missing? Hmm, what's missing? Well, the emotional roller coaster is what's missing. The uncertainty is what's missing. The chase, the constant need to prove himself. Healthy feels unfamiliar to him, to John. Unhealthy feels like home. Healthy feels unfamiliar. Unhealthy feels like home. And not because it's better, because it's recognizable. It's familiar. Let's say it's work. Maybe it's not a relationship for some of you. Maybe it's work. Let's say someone grows up believing they're only valuable when they're producing, okay? So they finally get a job with supportive leadership, reasonable expectations, work-life balance, and encouragement, all the good stuff. And then weeks later, they begin wondering, am I doing enough? So they start volunteering for extra work nobody asked them to do. They answer emails late at night when they should be sleeping, resting for the next day. They create pressure that wasn't there. And why? Why are they doing this? Well, because slowing down feels uncomfortable. Rest feels unfamiliar. But stress feels like productivity. Okay? Again, familiar doesn't always mean healthy. And here's what I want you to remember. Sometimes we don't sabotage peace because we dislike peace. Sometimes we sabotage peace because we've never learned to trust it in the first place, right? Sometimes we do not sabotage peace because we dislike it. We sabotage it because we've never learned to trust it. Seeds. Healing often feels uncomfortable, not because it's wrong, but because your pain, that chaos, it's been introducing itself as home for you for a very long time. For some of you, a lifetime. And when you've lived in chaos long enough, peace can feel like a stranger. But don't mistake unfamiliar for unsafe. Sometimes the unfamiliar is exactly where healing begins. And here's a deeper truth: the enemy doesn't always have to convince us to choose what's wrong. Sometimes all the enemy has to do is convince us that what's familiar must be what's right. But the divine often works in the unfamiliar. Forgiveness feels unfamiliar. Healthy boundaries, they feel unfamiliar. Grace feels unfamiliar. Sitting still, being still with yourself, that feels unfamiliar. Real real peace, it feels unfamiliar. Growth almost always begins with discomfort. Understand that, because healing introduces us to a way of living we've never experienced before. So if your healing feels awkward, if healthy relationships feel strange, if peace feels almost too quiet, don't assume something is wrong. It may simply be that you're experiencing something your heart has never had the opportunity to call normal. And that's not something to fear, that's something to celebrate. That's a celebration, because healing isn't just changing your behavior, it's teaching your heart a new definition of home. Yeah. Sometimes we don't repeat the event, we repeat the emotion. Think about that for a moment. We repeat the emotion. Yeah. Most people aren't intentionally recreating the same situations. It's not on purpose, it's not intentional. They're recreating the same emotional experience because it's familiar. Someone who constantly felt rejected as a child, yeah, they may unknowingly choose emotionally unavailable partners. Not because they enjoy rejection, but because their heart is still searching for a different ending to an old, familiar story. Someone who always had to prove themselves may become addicted to overworking. Someone who felt invisible may constantly seek approval from everyone around them, validation. The circumstances change, but the emotional need remains the same. Those are what we call survival skills, operating in survival mode until it's healed. And survival skills can become our identity. And this is one of the most overlooked truths. Many things we call personality are actually survival strategies. You may say, I'm just independent, but perhaps independence became necessary because no one consistently showed up for you. I'm a people pleaser. That one sounds familiar. But maybe people pleasing others once protected you from rejection, right? I'm always in control. Maybe losing control once felt dangerous. Fear for letting go of control. I'm emotionally distant. Well, maybe vulnerability once came with pain. Maybe that's what that is. These weren't flaws, they were adaptations. They help you survive. But surviving and living are not the same thing. What protected you then may be limiting you now. Hear me, seeds, hear me. What protected you then may be limiting you now. Let's go to scripture. Scripture tells us in Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Now, the heart follows what it believes, right? And notice the scripture doesn't say everything flows from your circumstances. It says everything flows from your heart. If your heart believes I'm not enough, your decisions will reflect that belief. If your heart believes that I have to earn love, your relationships will reflect that belief. If your heart believes I'll always be abandoned, you may sabotage healthy relationships before they ever have a chance to grow or even get started. What lives in the heart eventually shows up in our behavior. Another scripture, Romans 12:2, it tells us, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of the mind. The mindset must be renewed. That's what that's saying. Notice the word pattern, okay? The divine acknowledges patterns in this scripture, but he also reveals the solution, and that solution is the renewing of the mind. So changing your location won't automatically change your life. Changing relationships, it won't automatically change your life. Changing jobs won't automatically change your life. Because wherever the mind goes, the unresolved pattern is following you. If you haven't resolved that, you're just taking the old patterns to a new place. That's it. And you're going to have the same experience, just new place, new face. That's it. Healing begins when our thinking changes, changing your mindset, renewing the mind. The mind must be renewed, period. So let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. What keeps showing up in your life? Not the names, not the faces, not the places. I'm talking about the feeling. What's the feeling that keeps showing up in your life? Is it rejection? Is it fear, shame, control? Is it loneliness, approval, or need for validation? What is it? What's that feeling? Sometimes the pattern isn't outside of us. Sometimes it's inside of us. It's within us. The enemy is within me. Okay? for for those of you who haven't heard that one before, the enemy is within me. The enemy is within you. It's the pattern that you keep repeating because you haven't renewed the mind. So sometimes that thing is inside of us waiting to be acknowledged and healed. Not condemned, not ignored, not shamed, because we don't do shaming over here at Ordering the Seed. But to be acknowledged and to be healed, it's waiting for that. It's waiting for that. Seeds, one of the greatest signs of healing isn't that temptation disappears. It's that the old invitation no longer feels like home. That's growth. Your past may explain your patterns, but it does not have permission to write your future. You are not condemned to repeat what you've survived. You have the ability, through awareness, through truth, through divine creator's wisdom, to create a different future than the one you inherited. Okay? You're not condemned. You do not have to repeat what you've survived. You have the ability, through awareness, through truth, through our creator's wisdom. You have the ability to create a different future than the one you inherited. So, thank you for spending this time with me today. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who may be trying to understand why they keep returning to places they've prayed to leave, okay? In our next episode, I want to get this in our next episode, we're going to take the next step in this journey, breaking the cycle. We're going to take the next step as we explore how to interrupt the cycle. Okay? We'll move from understanding the pattern to learning practical ways to break it. So please, please, please come back. We look forward to having you. We look forward to having you. We're going to walk this journey together. Okay? So until next time, I love you guys. Keep watering the seed because healthy roots always produce healthier fruit. And remember, let's live a better way. Bye for now.